Good morning. Bonjour, Oki, Tenche, Ambawastich, and welcome, students, educators, judges, live audience members, and those joining us on the live stream from across Canada and around the world to the 2024 edition of the Map the System Canada Canadian Final. My name is James Stotch, and I am the Executive Director of the Institute for Community Prosperity here at Mount Royal University. For the past 6 years, the Institute has been proud to serve as the national organizer and host for Map the System Canada. I encourage you all to engage with the Map the System social media channels on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and the channel whose name we shall not speak. Cheer for your favorite team, but please also comment on and encourage all of the teams you'll see and hear this morning. We are privileged to be having this event on Mochkinstis, on the land of the Nivethitha, or Blackfoot peoples. We as treaty peoples are grateful for those who have shared their land through treaty, including here on Treaty 7, the Siksiga, the Piikani, the Gaina, Eyahe Nakota, and the Tsuut'ina Dene. And we acknowledge the Métis people, where Calgary is home to Districts 5 and 6 of the Métis Nation of Alberta. We're also grateful to the original people of this region, including teachers like Roy Bearchief, Espoom, who you will hear from in a few minutes, who continue to share their knowledge that is crucial to really understanding systems in a holistic way, where context, flow, relationships, wisdom, ethical action, accountability, both to the earth and to the future, all matter a great deal. Without this knowledge, we would be lost. Map the System is a very unique student competition that asks students to think differently about social challenges. And by social, we mean environmental, economic, equity-based, health challenges, and so on. Why do such problems persist? Even though we pour millions into social science research, we have countless NGOs and charities and social movements and public policy efforts focused on any given issue, and we have more educated population than at any time in human history. One important reason is that we still think asystemically. We view problems through the narrow scope of our professional silos or our academic disciplines. Map the System challenges students to go well beyond their disciplines, to question not just practices, policies, and structures, but deeply held assumptions, often even at the level of culture and collective mental models. It is a bridge between students as learners and students as change makers. This is the 8th such Canada-wide final, the 4th in person, the first in Calgary since 2017. This past weekend, we welcomed 20 teams from 8 provinces coast to coast. These teams were whittled down from 183 full submissions through judging events held on each campus. Each campus chose their top team to represent the school at this national final. After careful consideration, the judges yesterday chose from those 20 teams present this weekend the top 6 of those 20 to advance to today's Canadian final. And today we will be watching and listening to the presentations from these top 6 teams, and the event will close with the announcement of this year's Map the System Canada winner. There's actually 14 different awards, so there are many winners. All 6 of these submissions will be posted for public download on the Map the System Canada website. So I just want to thank a few people and organizations that made this possible. Map the System and this Canadian final would not be possible without the generous support of ATCO. I will say more about ATCO in a few moments. We're also very privileged to be joined today by Daniella Papi Thornton, who created the Map the System Challenge when she was Deputy Director of the Skoll Centre at the University of Oxford. Map the System is still run globally by the Skoll Centre, which is based at Oxford Syed Business School. And normally, the teams presenting here this morning would be competing for a chance to go on to Oxford in the summer to be part of a global final competition. However, this year, the global final has been temporarily suspended while Map the System undergoes a global redesign and relaunch for the 2025 year, which means this morning is the end of the journey for these teams. It is why, for this year, we have chosen this splendid venue for the event, and why we have added an optional experience for participating students and others, educators and the public, to continue on to a unique event we are putting together called the Banff System Summit, which begins this evening, immediately following the competition. I'd also like to acknowledge the support of our programming partner, the School Centre, University of Oxford. Nick Gregg, incoming Senior Manager for Impact Education at School, is with us today. I also want to thank Kurt White and his colleagues at the Hunter Hub for Entrepreneurial Thinking at the University of Calgary, who played a crucial role this past weekend, hosting the semifinal all day yesterday at their stunning facilities. A shout out as well to Tourism Calgary, which helped sponsor the transportation for this weekend. And finally, a huge thank you to my colleagues at MRU. All of our team members have been mobilized to make sure the past 3 days, as well as the coming 3 days, for those of you going on to Banff, go as smoothly as possible. I am going to briefly single out a few people, Dr. Catherine McGowan, the faculty lead on this program, who went way, way beyond. So Catherine was provided with a single course release to help make this happen, and turned it into a full-time job. Also to our information designer, Amy Rintoul, who created the visual language and materials that make wayfinding so clear and engaging. Cordelia Snowden, Barb Rollison, Mizuki Oshita, and of course the amazing Ashley Dion. And Ashley, as most of you know, manages Map the System Canada, no small feat, and not only coordinated every aspect of this event down to the last small detail, but also was the linchpin in making this Banff System Summit come to life, a completely different 3-day event that starts in just a few short hours. So equally critical to supporting the competition are, of course, the judges. This year we have a remarkable cohort of judges from across Canada. And maybe judges just kind of give a wave when I call your name. Vanessa Sun, Rasheen Dillon, Janani Ravakularam, Jillian Ma, Tim Fox, and Luke Dancoz. And so please note, judges are not just evaluating today's presentation. More importantly, they're evaluating the team's formal submission, which included a 3,500-page written piece, an explanatory piece, a set of visual maps, and a detailed bibliography. The judges will be looking today for the application of a systems thinking approach, the understanding of the nature of the challenge landscape, so that's the student's grasp of the problem itself. They will be looking for what's our understanding of the landscape of solution efforts that already exist, so interventions, innovations that are already being deployed to help deal with the challenge. They will look for what are the identification of levers of change or new potential interventions that haven't been considered. And finally, they'll look for the students' own insights and lessons learned as they've gone on this journey. So briefly on the awards, the top 4 winning teams will have access to something called an Apprenticing with a Problem grant. This is up to $10,000 per team to deepen their understanding of the project over the coming year. We've had teams in the past produce mini documentaries, interactive websites, learning programs, and other initiatives that start to bridge their analysis toward concrete action. The top 3 teams will also be awarded a cash prize. $4,000 for first prize, $3,000 for second, $2,000 for third, and we will also have 6 excellence awards at the Canadian final, each worth $500. So these will be presented to not just the 6 teams potentially, but open to all 20 teams. And we will go through those specific categories when we award them. So before we see and hear from the top 6 student teams, there are a few very special guests who are going to provide us with some words of welcome and encouragement. In my more hubristic moments when I call myself a systems thinker, our first speaker is a reminder that I have a very long way to travel. from those kind of Western boxes and categories and disciplines that still shape the mental models I inhabit. PC, Roy Bearchief, is a member of an influential leader in the Siksika Nation. He is Espoomsta, or helper, with MRU's Faculty of Health, Community and Education, what we might think of through a Western frame as an elder in residence. Roy holds an honorary Doctor of Laws from the University of Calgary, where he completed his Master's and Bachelor of Social Work. He also has a social work diploma from MRU. He is a valued friend, teacher, and incredible systems thinker. Roy Bearchief.
Did anybody time me how long it took me to? 40 years ago, I'll be up here just like that. To me, this picture says a lot. Because it speaks to Anitopisida spider web. Because basically that's what you're doing. These are young people that are coming up on stage and sharing their ideas. I was just speaking with Miss Southern, Anne, talking to her about these young people, fresh minds, fresh ideas. But what I often tell young people is find a mentor to build on your fresh ideas. Get maybe somebody to critique your fresh ideas, your fresh minds. Because you're the ones that will make a difference. Isochzik really means the future. You're the ones that are going to make that difference. But for now, the title, Espoomsta. Espoomsta means helper in Blackfoot. And that's what I do in this not only this institution, but out there. I also do work out there. To me, I often see myself when people talk about Biggs-Engel are the old people, the elders. Hey, I'm 75, I'm coming 76. But I still have the capability of using this thing here. For me, that's why I use the title Espoomsta. Simply help, especially around reconciliation. Reconciliation, a lot of different facets to it. Systems thinking, lots of different facets to it. But sometimes you need to think outside the box. It's like Anitopisi. Hey, Anitopisi, bring it in here. This institution sits on Anitopisi. Out there, sits on Anitopisi. Wherever you go, Anitopisi is there, will always be there. Because it speaks to interrelatedness, interconnectedness, partnership, collaboration, support, whatever you want to put in there. Anitopisi brings people together. In that video that they came out of this one here, the video. And for me, what I often talk about Anitopisi, the spider web. Because the Creator instructed Anitopisi to wrap the world with the people in it and bring them down here. And then he told the people, I will leave you with Anitopisi, with the spider web. But if there's any problems anywhere on the web, it's going to vibrate. Which means it's going to vibrate. It was signal for the Creator to go and help. Systems thinking, the web, vibrations, go and help. But you know what? There's also good vibrations. It's like the song Beach Boys. Good vibration. A couple weeks' time, there's going to be graduation. Good vibrations. So don't forget, there's good vibrations too. We need to celebrate those things. It's like right now when the students come up on stage, you've got 5 people there deciding on who's going to be first, second, third, or whatnot. I'm glad you're there, not me. But to me, my people have always existed in systems thinking, a system. And that system was a way of life. A way of life. For me, that worked and helped my people. Ceremonies, songs, stories, kinship. Our kinship is a lot different from when you say aunt, uncle, first cousin, second cousin, third cousin. We don't have. Our strata is different. For me, that's why I often say I have many, many mothers, many fathers. It's because of my friends. Their parents look at me as their son. And for me, my daughters, I look at their friends as my daughters. It's a different system, but still it's that interconnection within that system. For me, I often say I am reborn into my culture. The reason I say that is because my formative years that I spent at the residential schools, 10 years from the age of 7 to 16, when I left, freedom. But you know, that had to go back to my culture. Had to be reborn into it, had to start. For me, that's why I often say, listen more, speak less. That's why we have 2 ears and one of these. Because also there are times that we tend to overanalyze. It's like systems thinking. Overanalyze, overthink. But you know, getting back to the human nature of it, there's something down here. It's called the heart. Going back down and listening to the heart. Otherwise, there was a counselor from Siksika that said, blame it on the mind, not the heart. Because sometimes we tend to stop at the main floor right here. we forget down in a basement there's a heart that would also guide you through a system. Systems thinking, everything. But for me, I want to encourage all of you that are contestants. Enjoy yourselves. You have an audience here that are going to listen, probably take some of those ideas. But for me, fresh minds, fresh ideas. Almost 76 years of using this head, and I'm glad it's still functional. But when I introduced Anitopisi, that interconnectedness started to become very apparent. Because you know what Anitopisi, the spider web, did not say. When those people started to form Anitopisi did not say, no, you don't belong here, you belong over there. No, you belong over there. Anitopisi does not care about language, color, race, whatever the case may be. Anitopisi welcomes everybody in there. For me, that's what systems thinking, a system that develop it, implement it, evaluate it, work on it, improve on it, because that's going to be the cycle. But anyways, I want to encourage contestants that are going to be up on stage. If you don't win, don't worry about it. Have fun. Because somebody out there is going to listen to you. So anyway, so thank you very much for having me. Just to say a few words. Anya, thank you.
Thank you, Roy. As I mentioned earlier, this Map the System Canada final would not be possible without the support, the enabling support of ATCO sponsorship. It's not just the prize money, it's not just the travel support for all 20 participating schools, nor is it just the entire infrastructure of Map the System Canada throughout the year. ATCO support comes in many non-monetary forms, including the enthusiastic support of the ATCO Space Lab team, led by Chief Transformation Officer George Constantinescu, who you'll be hearing a little bit about later. We are really honored today to be joined by ATCO's visionary Chief Executive Officer and Chair, Nancy Southern, who is also the Chair and Chief Executive Officer of Canadian Utilities Limited, an ATCO company. Reporting to the boards of directors, she's responsible for the leadership, strategic direction, and operations of both companies. Ms. Southern has played a prominent role for many years in advocating on social issues of global importance, most notably the rights of Indigenous peoples and the role of women in business. She is an honorary chief of the Gaina, or Blood Nation, who bestowed the name Aksistua Papi, or Brave Woman, upon her in 2012. Ms. Southern is also the recipient of numerous honors for her community and business leadership. In 2022, she received the Canadian Business Leader Lifetime Achievement Award from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. In 2020, she was awarded the British Empire Medal for services to British equestrian, military, and commercial interests in Alberta. In 2017, she was inducted into the Canadian Business Hall of Fame, to name just a few of the accolades. Also, this time last year, she received an honorary Doctor of Laws from MRU. Nancy.
Thank you, James, and good morning. I hope you enjoyed thoroughly your weekend in Banff together. I understand that there were some late nights, lots of socializing, and that's what these sessions really should be about. As Roy said to all of us, enjoy, have fun, learn from each other. Excuse me. Listen to each other. The networking of mapping the system is the most critical aspect of all the work that you're doing today. And I am truly humbled to stand before this incredible group of young people and to celebrate your extraordinary achievements over the course of the last years, culminating into this competition this weekend. I congratulate all of you. You have all made an exemplary effort, and the event is far more than competition, isn't it? It really is about friendships and networking, understanding all of the threads of the spider web in each individual and group postulation of what you're looking to solve. Celebrating change makers is what we are doing here. Innovators, you dare to challenge the status quo. Thank you, and never stop. You dream of a better future, and not just for yourselves, but for all of us. That's important too. That comes from the heart. It cannot be about one particular thing, and it cannot be self-aggrandizing. In many respects, and it's very close to my heart, I wanted to share a little bit about our company's history and our story of mapping a system 75 years ago. Roy talked about the importance of Mother Earth and always coming back to your roots, understanding how the world changes, how the earth changes, how nature changes. And we were really blessed in this area about 100 years ago, just over 100 years ago, when some creative, imaginative individuals actually found oil and natural gas in this region. All of a sudden, those hydrocarbons provided prosperity and an ability to heat homes, to do homework under light, and there was the development of a new energy system. But where were those people going to live? We were on the traditional lands of the first peoples of Canada. We didn't understand how to respect that in those days. But as humans, being ingenious, being entrepreneurial, we went out and we decided to look for more oil and more gas, but there was no place to live. And it was my grandfather and father who actually had the spark of an idea, using a traditional box and putting a bed inside it, putting a heating inside it, and being able to cook inside that box. It's become a ubiquitous box, and nobody had thought about it before. But all of a sudden, 75 years ago, a whole new to the world industry was born. Industrial workforce housing. That spark of an idea, understanding the needs of all of the participants within the web of development, created a whole new industry for the world. And as Roy said also, continuing to improve on it, expand it, find new solutions for the housing. At a time today where housing is a crisis, wherever you go in the world, It is our dream to continue to expand new systems, new technologies, to create affordable, easily deployed housing for a world in desperate need. These humble beginnings that we started with have marked the start of an incredible journey. And there have been great opportunities for ATCO. We're now involved in energy delivery, energy development, logistics, transportation, ports. It's a whole new world, and it is a complex world. The challenges are mighty, and the challenges for you are extremely complex. There's a tremendous deal of uncertainty in the world today. But it is the web, as Elder Roy expressed, where the vibrations happen to occur. There can be the spark of an idea, a celebration, or let's fix it. These challenges and the threads of the spider web are so woven together in this complex world. They create complex patterns, and that defies isolated solutions. And that's what you are doing, creating holistic solutions. Isolated solutions are not the way of the future. When we talk about housing, energy, national security, and more importantly, Indigenous reconciliation, the societal imperatives require that we first recognize that tugging on one thread of the spider web will have an impact on the rest of the web. I'm sure that you had plentiful experiences this weekend of every time you talked about an idea, a vibration on your thread, there was an impact, a ripple effect amongst all of your colleagues and the competitors here. It's only by understanding the interconnections and the interdependencies inherent to our challenges that we can resolve them. When you think about energy, when you think about housing, we must take into consideration current norms, current absolutes that have been imposed upon us. But your job as young, fresh thinkers in mapping the system is to challenge those norms, challenge those absolutes, find different ways. Don't accept the status quo. Quality of life is vitally important. Don't just be analytical. Use your heart. Use all the gifts that the Creator has given you. Your mind, your soul, your heart, your intuition. Never forget them. There's always a voice inside you saying, maybe there's more. Maybe this isn't right. Perhaps this is really wrong. And if it's really wrong and it feels in your gut like it's really wrong, stop. Find a way to fix that. Be true to yourself. In addressing the challenge of Indigenous reconciliation, we must acknowledge the historical and ongoing impacts of colonization. Yes, our forefathers didn't understand. They didn't realize the impact that they were having. And it is now incumbent upon all of us to truly understand how we can begin to empathize. We will never understand the true hurt, the ripping out of young children from their families and their culture, but understand that pain and try to comfort and find ways to acknowledge There is a rich culture and heritage out there that we're only scratching as white people, as new to this nation, as new to this new world. We're only scratching the tip of the iceberg in understanding that rich culture and understanding of Mother Earth. This will help us see the path towards justice and healing. And it is not a linear journey. It is a complex process, and it requires us to weave new webs of real truth and understand the value of true partnerships, friendships, kinship. And by recognizing these interdependencies, we can identify comprehensive solutions that not only foster economic growth, personal growth is what's important, respect, and promote cultural understanding. And it's for these reasons that Map the System, and indeed for all of you, unraveling the complexities of today's global challenges is such an important role that you're playing. You remind us that this intricate spider's web of each thread matters. Each step that we can bring closer, bring all of us closer to an equitable, resilient, and sustainable world is your purpose. And I would like to conclude today by commending all of you. And to the final 6 student teams, on behalf of the people of ATCO, a special congratulations. But it really is about the gathering and the listening and the learning. My father used to say that a dream is never just a dream. It's the wish to change your world. And it takes spirit and energy and commitment. And it takes passion, joy, and happiness. It takes vision, imagination, and belief. And it takes excellence to make dreams come true. Excellence means doing more than anyone ever believed you could do. It means paying attention to the smallest detail. And excellence means caring. And much like the Mount Royal University slogan, care deeply, build community, and create change. Thank you all for inspiring me. It may be that ATCO helped you come together, but I can guarantee you that you have helped me. You have inspired me to do more and to be better and to aspire to be like each of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. Beautiful words. And thank you again to ATCO. Some of you who are visiting MRU, I think there's 96 students and educators here the last few days. In many conversations, it dawned on me that people didn't actually know a lot about this institution. So it's my great pleasure to invite our next guest to share a bit more about this unique institution. Acting President, Dr. Chad London. Chad is Provost and Vice President Academic at MRU, as well as a Professor of Kinesiology. He's held a variety of academic positions, including as Dean of the College of Kinesiology at the University of Saskatchewan, and previously was the Dean of the Faculty of Health, Community, and Education right here from 2011 to 2016. Chad's teaching and research spans leadership in sport, recreation, and human well-being. Chad London.
Thanks, James. Good morning, everyone. Talk about 2 difficult acts to follow. The highest honor that a university can bestow is an honorary degree. And as James mentioned, Nancy received hers from Mount Royal a year ago. And the week after next, Roy Bearchief will become Dr. Elder Roy Bearchief and be bestowed an honorary degree as well. Thank you both for your words this morning. I'm thrilled to be able to welcome you to the campus, to Mount Royal's campus for Map the System Canada Final 2024. It's great that we can host you here in the Bella Concert Hall. Welcome to the viewers on the live stream as well. Hopefully we get to see you on campus soon. As James mentioned, it's been a journey from 409 teams to 20 teams and 6 teams present this morning. It's an impressive accomplishment by you all. And I want to congratulate each and every one of you for the work that you've done and the work you're doing. As we know, the world's faced with many challenges where we find ourselves asking, how can we address and solve big questions? And that's where Map the System comes in. It's unmatched in its ability to bring students and educators together to create the bedrock of knowledge for solutions to those big problems. And it warms my heart to know that Map the System work is happening. One of the many advantages of being an academic leader at a university is you're still encouraged to do your own research. And my research is in healthy campuses and how can we ensure from a systems approach amidst many global challenges and local difficulties, how can we ensure that we can enhance well-being on our campuses? And so when I hear about systems work and hear about the problems that you're looking at and the solutions that you're coming to, it definitely warms my heart. Here at Mount Royal, we value this work. We're committed to providing students with a transformative education, which means by the time they graduate, they're set up to succeed in a world that is constantly changing, but also deeply connected. And we make this happen through an approach to education that we've been providing through a diverse set of programs for over 100 years. These academic programs and also the work done by our institutes have challenged students to engage in systems thinking through things like the degrees that we offer with a concentration in information design and social innovation, through the TRICO Changemakers Studio, which facilitates collaboration between campus and community, through the Institute for Community Prosperity, which offers the Catamount Fellowship, a cohort-based learning experience for students to dig into real-world challenges with community partners, and of course, Map the System, which has brought us together today. These programs and the individuals who teach and lead them prepare the people who eventually work in our communities, who will be the decision makers in government and who will be citizens driven to lead change. Being here today means you have these skills, among many others, that allow you to move through this research process of asking a really good question related to a social challenge, then taking a systems approach to determine what needs to be done to make a change for the betterment of society. And in conclusion, as I recognize and praise the incredible students here today, I also want to acknowledge the educators, the alumni, the supporters who have offered guidance throughout the Map the System process. This initiative would not have been possible without the individuals with expertise going above and beyond, stepping up as mentors, resources, and our judges as well. Thank you for helping these students meet their goals. And finally, I'll end by extending sincere gratitude to ATCO, to Nancy for sponsoring Map the System Canada. Thank you for taking the time to join us today and for being such a champion of Mount Royal and our students as well. Good luck to the students who will soon present, and as Elder Roy said, have fun.
Thank you, Chad. Albert Einstein was rumored to have said that when presented with an hour to solve a difficult problem, one should spend the first 55 minutes of that hour thinking about the problem itself, and the last 5 minutes on the solution. But the dominant culture that we inhabit generously rewards and incentivizes that last 5 minutes through, for example, hackathons, case competition, design sprints, social venture pitch fests, and so on. But Map the System uniquely focuses on those first 55 minutes, what you might call the pre-innovation stage. It patiently rewards students for not rushing towards a solution and instead helping us understand what the heck is actually happening, the what, the why, who's involved, how might we start identifying where change is both needed and plausible. The first 55 minutes is also the title of a forthcoming book that I'm privileged to co-author with our keynote presenter, Daniella Papi Thornton, founder of Map the System when she was deputy director at the Scholl Centre at the University of Oxford, and a systems educator extraordinaire. Daniella has published and given talks on systems-led leadership, including through her 2016 essay, Tackling Heropreneurship, which became one of the most downloaded articles in the history of the Stanford Social Innovation Review. She teaches at the University of Chicago, Dartmouth College, Yale, the Watson Institute, the University of Colorado Boulder, among many other places. Daniella also wrote a book called Learning Service and designed a learning tool called the Impact Gaps Canvas, which is used at accelerator programs and in social impact initiatives around the world. Daniella.
So my job this morning is to give you a little bit of a quick history of why we started this, and then give you a secret of how to win. So I'll start with why we started this. Is when I was at Oxford, I realized that, myself included, I was being motivated by all these competitions that were inviting us to pitch our solution. Here is my answer to how I'm going to solve this. And the way that those pitches were done and incentivized and taught were about, how are you going to fix this? And I had already spent 6 years living in Cambodia when I came to do my MBA, and I left there saying, I don't know how to fix this. It's complex. And my linear thinking action had actually caused more harm than good at different times. And so this competition was designed to be an alternative approach to say, instead of how are you going to win, it's what do you know and what do you want to learn about this so that you can find a way to contribute. And by contributing, you know you can't do it alone. You are finding your path to contribute. And if we can all do that, then we can create the shifts that we need in the systems that are unhealthy around us. And that leads me to say, what's the secret of how you win? The secret is that who cares about this silly competition? You win by applying this into the real world and finding a problem that you care about and contributing. You have already won because you now have this knowledge that no one can take away from you. You spent a lot of time, Nancy just talked about excellence, to get here today, to be one of the finalists who is here all weekend, to have completed this and submitted. So many drop out before they even submit. To have done that, you have won because you now have a skill set and a way of understanding problems that no one can take away from you. And this problem that you worked on right now might or might not be a problem that you work on way into the future, but that way of thinking is something you'll apply. Look at this awesome panel of judges, right? Part of why we started this was that so you could have, look, some of these are alumni of Map the System up there, right? Who were sitting in your seats before, and now they're out in the world contributing, and then have been selected because the way that they think and contribute to the world is in such a beautiful systems-led way that they're now up there. We're all talking about our age, I feel like. I'm 45, I turn 46 in a few weeks, which to some of you might seem really, really old. And let me just tell you, I'm imagining at 76 too, you're really young inside still, your just body gets older. But at 46, I am now at a stage where I have, I'm more than 10 years out of my MBA, and let me tell you, I have a lot of friends who are in the throes of either midlife crises, divorces, things, because I see a lot of them are doing stuff that they don't care about. And it is a privileged position to say, oh, do work that you care about. I recognize we need to go out there, we need to make money, we need to feed our families, we need to feed ourselves. But there will be a point in your life in the future where you've done that. And then you have to get on a plane like I did to come here, and I have a 4-year-old and 7-year-old at home. And I have to say, I have to justify leaving them so I can come here. And I justify that by saying, all of you who are speaking today, I want you to write me a note when you're 46. And first thing I want you to say is, 46, I thought it was really old, but it's not that old, right? It's not, it's really not. Young inside, right? And I got on a plane today, and I left some people behind that I love, friends, family, whoever. And I'm proud because I am contributing. And my contribution today is, I want you to turn around. If you're in this competition, I want you to high five whoever's on your team. If you're not in it, but you're sitting next to someone, high five each other right now, because we're gonna do this false, yes, do that. High fives. You have already won. And the way that we win is when you go out and you apply this, because that is why we are here, right? Nancy, George, Alicia, Andrea, the ATCO team, they're funding this not just to see this competition, but because they believe that these skill sets are what is needed to improve the world, okay? So no matter if at the end of today, if you get a prize, you don't get a prize, whoever you high-fived right now, I want you to high-five them again at the end of this day and say, we have won because we have worked hard to be here, and we are going to apply what we do into the future. And you're going to send me that email in 10 years, 20 years, or 80 years, and I won't be there, but send it to my kid, and say, I'm using this, and I found a way to contribute. Thank you, congratulations to all of you. You have already won, and I'm so proud to see you all here today and so grateful that this is still going. Thank you to Oxford, to MRU, to ATCO, to everyone to keep this thing alive. And this is our contribution, and you win and we win when you go out and apply it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniella. And now, the main event. This is, you're gonna get a chance to see what Daniella set in motion 8 years ago. We're now gonna hear from the 6 teams. Each team has 10 minutes to present, and then the judges will ask 2 questions of each team. There's a bit of a break in between teams just to get the setup going. And feel free to, try not to leave the venue during a team presentation, but feel free to just run outside, go to the washroom. The washrooms are just to the left there. There's a coffee shop across the street if you're thirsty as well, because it will take a little while to get through this the rest of the morning, but do feel free in between the teams to dart out if you feel the need. So, without further ado, we are going to move on to our first school, University of New Brunswick.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our presentation on the role of positive psychology in the adoption of distributed energy resources. We'd like to take you on our journey where we learn that conservation and sustainability are mutually exclusive. Hi, my name is Syed. This is Olympias and Vincent. We're engineering students from the University of New Brunswick, and we're passionate about energy and sustainability. The goal of this presentation is to share the background of our problem, the system dynamics, as well as the problem and solution landscape. We'll also touch base on the key insights and lessons learned over the past few months.
So we all know that to ensure the world for future generations of humanity, we need to transition to a low-carbon economy. But we're not doing a very good job at this. In New Brunswick, 19% of electricity is still generated using fossil fuels. And in 2021, 27% of the greenhouse gas emissions emitted in New Brunswick were produced by the power system. So it begs to ask, why? What's holding us back from this important transition? Well, that's the question we asked ourselves, and it led us on the journey we're about to take you on. Now, an important aspect of the energy transition is the increasing use of zero-carbon generation sources. And using distributed energy resources, or DERs, we can tap into these sources and produce power where the people are. Now, DERs include technology such as solar panels and batteries, and they connect directly to the distribution system. DERs provide consumers control over their power generation, they relieve transmission infrastructure from increasing power demands, and they provide energy security to the province. But the adoption of DERs has not been at a rate relative to the immense scale of the problem at hand. So what's holding us back? Well, we then looked at the political, economic, and social challenges of the problem, and we discovered that by increasing the intermittent generation of the power system, we decrease the relative dispatchability of the grid, which means that the utility has less control over how much power is generated and when it comes onto the grid. Now, energy storage can alleviate that problem, but since the utility doesn't currently control residential energy storage technology, the dispatchability challenge isn't solved from the utility's perspective. We also learned that the transmission system isn't designed to accept power from the distribution system. So there's a limit to how much power we can inject into the distribution system before it tries to enter the transmission system. We found that government policy and government programs for the energy transition are difficult to implement due to politicization, which impedes the government's ability to play its role in the energy transition. Finally, we found that there's uncertainty among Canadians on government programs that are already implemented, such as the Canada Fuel Charge or the carbon tax, as it's commonly called. So we began to wonder how these challenges influence the system and what kind of feedback loops have been created that have led us to our current situation. And we created this causal loop diagram that presents the causal relationships within the system. Now, there's a lot here, but we're going to go through it together. When we take a closer look at the increasing use of intermittent generation, we see that the intermittency of that generation paired with the low level of energy storage supports the current use of the power system model, which makes it difficult to transition away from fossil fuels. We also see that as we increase intermittent generation, the revenue of the utility decreases, which makes it difficult for the utility to invest into new technologies such as DERs. When we take a look at this side of the causal loop diagram, we see that there are many open loops. And this side of the causal loop diagram includes challenges such as limited availability of alternatives of fossil fuels for New Brunswickers, as well as uncertainty in those federal programs like the Canada Fuel Charge, and limited ownership of DERs as assets, as well as limited personal ownership of the decarbonization problem. So we thought to ourselves that there must be a way to close some of these loops. And to begin furthering our understanding of the challenges and identifying gaps in the system, we categorize those challenges using an iceberg model.
The first level of the iceberg model is known as the events level, and this tells us the occurrences in the power system that are getting a reaction. Now, these events are only symptoms to the problem, and reacting to these events will not lead to systemic change. The second level to the problem is the observed trends level, and this tells us the patterns in the system. From our interview with former policymakers and politicians, we discovered that politicians are often incentivized to cater to the values of their own political party rather than that of another political party. Also, in New Brunswick, there is an energy monopoly, so not only do politicians want to cater to the values of their own political party, but also to the interests of this energy monopoly. The third level is the underlying structures level. And the key underlying structure in the system is NB Power's debt, which limits the amount of energy projects that they can undertake. The last level to the problem is the mental models, which describes the beliefs in the system. Now, according to a survey by Nanos, 46% of Canadians believe that a carbon tax is ineffective or is too little to influence the current fossil fuel use in New Brunswick. Now, this has led to the resentment of the carbon tax and enforces the mentality that a carbon tax is a burden and is ineffective in influencing change. Also, there is a paradigm of centralized power generation. New Brunswickers are accustomed to the traditional centralized power generation that they hardly think of the individual ownership of power generation. Now, after analyzing the levels to the problem, we decided to explore existing solutions in the system, and that led us to discover some successful and unsuccessful solutions. The successful solutions include the implementation of renewable energy incentive programs, such as the Greener Home Grants, which offers up to $10,000 of interest-free loans, and also the implementation of community energy co-ops. Some unsuccessful solutions include the attempt to control the power coming back from DERs onto the grid, and also the effort to improve grid connectivity. And this has been unsuccessful due to financial limitations on MB Power's part. Now, from these solutions, we identified some gaps that we believe, if filled, could lead to the rapid decarbonization of the power system.
The first gap highlighted was the carbon tax ineffectiveness in addressing the challenges of the general population. As my colleague Olympias highlighted, 46% of Canadians believe that the fuel charge is ineffective in reaching Canada's net zero goals, or even an appropriate method of reducing the consumption of fossil fuels. As a result, Canadians don't feel any ownership of decarbonization, which means behavioral change is being enforced on them. However, through education programs, Canadians can be showed how their money can be used, which can go a long way. For example, the Gaia Project, which empowers you to take action on climate change through education. The second gap highlighted through our causal loop diagram is a clearly missing gap between conservation of fossil fuel usage and energy and sustainability through alternative resources. Creation of policies and the fuel charge are mechanisms to achieve conservation, but that does not mean sustainability. Sustainability can be achieved through interventions like using profits from the fuel charge invested into entities like energy co-ops, giving individuals ownership of DERs, and strengthening their connection with energy, achieving sustainability. But how does that look like? Well, through behavioral change at individual level and the adoption of alternative energy sources, we can bring a change in the mental model of what the Canada fuel charge really is. In conclusion, some key insights we gain is that the aging infrastructure and the rise in demands create a strain on the transmission system. The mental models and underlying structures provide high leverage for systemic change. And lastly, conservation does not mean sustainability. The reduction in the consumption of a resource is conservation. However, sustainability can be achieved through alternative energy sources. Some last lessons learned were that the regulatory changes to the Electricity Act of New Brunswick will provide economic landscape that supports local energy generation. Secondly, the reframing of the carbon tax will encourage consumers to take on sustainable practices sooner. And lastly, we've learned that there's an opportunity to connect conservation and sustainability through entities like energy co-ops, giving individuals more proportional ownership of DERs. Thank you.
Thank you, team, for your presentation, and I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you put behind this analysis. I think that you're pointing to some really strong solutions. I think that you're very thoughtful about what solutions you did choose to look into based on some of the leverage points that you were finding in your analysis. One thing that I'm thinking about is often when we think about self-determination for Indigenous communities, when you think about reconciliation, when you think about things like energy poverty or access to the benefits that can come from such infrastructure or from such solutions to communities that may not have equal or equitable access to things like energy grids or power systems, how would your analysis of this system change? I do know that you recognize this sort of as a limitation of your research and that you didn't cover that in your scope, but just any thoughts on how your analysis might change or how those leverage points might change if we were thinking about some of those communities?
So, yes, we didn't, one of the limitations of our project is that we didn't do enough research on the relationship between Indigenous people with the power system. And so further, in addition to that, there's a large rural population in New Brunswick that might change the, let's see, I think we have a slide here. You know, we see some differences in opportunities between rural populations and urban populations, and that could include the indigenous populations in New Brunswick. So for example, the rural populations, you know, there's certainly fewer alternatives for fossil fuels compared to the urban populations. But we also see that the relationship to decentralized power tends to be, there tends to be a little bit more agency there. So perhaps some of the solutions might change. There's certainly more land in rural New Brunswick in terms of being able to put solar farms and things like that compared to the urban population. So the solution of the energy co-op, for example, that might change. Although, yeah, we haven't really thought too much about how those would change.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for a very interesting presentation indeed. I was wondering, listening to your presentation, if you know, what if the part of the solution was to produce and to consume less energy instead of shifting to new ways of producing it? You know, I guess what I'm talking about is the degrowth movement. I wanted to know if you had come across, you know, things about that movement in your research, and if so, how would that influence, you know, the solution?
Well, that brings us to our point about conservation and sustainability. Reducing the amount of energy that we're using leans towards conservation. We observe from the analysis of the problem that what we need is not actually conservation, but sustainability, and that is the role that does play in the system.
Thank you.
If I may just take a couple seconds to add on to that, we didn't come across the degrowth movement, so we're not very familiar.
Okay, thank you for acknowledging.
Fantastic. Thank you, University of New Brunswick. Next up, and we'll give them a little while to come up and get set up, but I'm going to call on University of Manitoba. It does take a few minutes in between. Judges need to kind of collect their thoughts and write their opinions down. So we'll just have a few minutes to get ready. But next up, University of Manitoba.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to start off by asking you to imagine something with me here. Imagine you're at your doctor's office, and you're constantly being called the incorrect name and wrong pronouns, and you're not given the option to correct your gender on any of the paperwork. Now imagine one more thing. Every time you go out, you have to plan ahead to ensure that there is going to be a washroom accessible to you. Unfortunately, this is an all too true reality for transgender and gender diverse individuals within Manitoba without the proper access to gender affirming care. Today, I'd like to speak to you on that lack of access to gender affirming care within Manitoba. Gender affirming care essentially is any kind of care provided to an individual to either affirm their gender physically or emotionally. Keeping this in mind, we look at the World Health Organization definition of gender affirming care, and it can be a single or comprehensive approach, making it very multifaceted and very unique for every individual involved. Also, this makes transgender and gender diverse individuals the main applicants and users of gender affirming care. So being transgender means the gender you identify as does not correlate with the one you were born at birth with or assigned at birth with. Like myself, I identify as transgender. I've identified as transgender for about 7 years now. I've relied on community support services to fill the gaps in essential care that I need, and unfortunately, I've had to tell my primary care providers, doctors, and nurses about my identity and what my needs are. This has led me to advocate for a change. So, gender affirming care, the World Health Organization also goes to say it can be split into 4 different categories: social, behavioral, medical, and psychological. Now, it is common misbelief that medical gender affirming care is the only form of gender affirming care, but this is not true. It includes all of these categories, or depending on the individual, one or a combination. This misinformation is just one of the barriers standing in the way to properly accessing gender affirming care. Some other barriers we can talk about is the lack of education, the stigmatization, lack of resources, difficult physical access, the ingrained biases, and the policies involved. As you can see, this is a very diverse and intense issue. And so to hopefully put this into a little bit of context for you to see all the entities working together, I put this into a map for you. It does look scary, I know, but let's just focus on one category of this. Let's look at the health aspect of gender affirming care. So if we look at some of these elements involved, let's talk about the lack of research to gender affirming care. This refers to the public or even healthcare providers. So if we have a lack of research, this is going to increase the lack of education for public and healthcare providers, increasing our lack of healthcare providers that are able to attend to gender affirming care, and then decreasing our overall healthcare resources. As we can see, this can end up falling into a loop of relationships, putting a strain on advocacy and community supports to try to fill in the gaps that are standing in the way with these in relationships that are affecting one another within the cycle. So today, I'd also like to focus on 4 main issues that are modern and important to Manitoba, such as gender affirming care being a target for discriminatory policies, the lack of information and research surrounding gender affirming care and transgender health, the outdated medical curriculum, and the lack of healthcare providers overall. First of all, let's talk about the discriminatory policies going on across Canada and Manitoba. This here is a map from November 2023, currently the most relevant, going over the anti-trans policies currently in Canada. If we look at Manitoba, we're lucky enough to be in the blue, the low-risk category, but this wasn't until last fall of 2023. That's when the NDP were voted in, and they are making huge strides for change for visibility for transgender individuals. Unfortunately, we have had our share of protests against transgender health, such as the parental rights policy, which is going to ask permission to parents for being able to call your child the correct name, correct pronouns by teachers, social workers, and even guidance counselors. And in Manitoba, yes, it's low risk, but looking federally as Canada as a whole, we are high risk. And again, this can be to the parental pronoun policies and also book bans that are going on across Canada, banning any books that talk about gender expression or gender identity. Second, I'd like to talk about the lack of research and data on gender affirming care and transgender individuals. For example, Statistics Canada 2021 was the very first census in Canada to actually include the option to self-identify as transgender or non-binary. This has resulted in a huge lack of data surrounding transgender people, so we don't know how many people are actually needing to access gender affirming care, who will or who do access this care. Next, there is an issue with the medical curriculum for the healthcare providers that should be applying this. So, according to a study by Chan and colleagues in 2016, they analyzed the medical school curriculum across universities across Canada, including the University of Manitoba. They looked at what the participants and students felt when it comes to treating transgender patients. So I'd just like to point out a couple numbers to you here. First of all, transgender individuals have unique health needs. So majority of students, 92%, agree, yes, they do have unique health needs we need to be able to address. Number 6, as a physician, I feel it's important to know if my patient is struggling with their gender identity. Again, you have 99% of these students agreeing it is important for them to know if their patient is struggling. Unfortunately, the major issue lies with question number 9. I felt that the topic of transgender health was proficiently taught. You only have 24% of future healthcare providers feeling like they're going to be able to provide this healthcare. Lastly, the overall lack of healthcare providers in Manitoba. The Family Doctor Finder program is a program in Manitoba to link Manitobans with primary care providers. This can be doctors or nurse practitioners. According to them, it is currently an 8-week wait to get a call back from the program, with additional weeks to even get in to make an appointment to see your doctor. Keeping this in mind, we'd look at the Trans Youth Canada survey, also done across Canada, about youths who were then referred to gender affirming care clinics, and they saw 13 to 14 months wait to actually get into the clinic, and then 269 days for waiting once you get their referral. So that means you have an 8-week wait or more to see your primary care provider, and if they cannot provide that care for you, you're going to have to wait another 269 days average to actually get the care you need. Though there are existing solutions, there's hope on the horizon here for us. One of those being community-based care. So these are clinics like a clinic in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and also Rainbow Resource Center. They provide healthcare to individuals and people who are falling in between the gaps of missing healthcare providers and they just aren't being treated, such as transgender individuals who are needing that gender-affirming care. Also, government-based policies, like I said, the NDP were voted in, and they're pushing for Transgender Day of Visibility, and then also bills like Bill C-16, which was put across in 2016 to put in the terms gender identity and gender expression as grounds for discrimination. Also, community-based advocacy, such as the Human Rights Campaign, that's from America, but they also do a lot of great work in Canada, pushing for visibility and equal rights and policies for LGBT people across Canada and the States. And then also, of course, we have our Pride events, such as Pride Winnipeg, just showing up to show your support so people feel like they actually have a community with them. So we've analyzed some of the gaps and issues there, and how can we address these levers of change? So K-12 school policies and infrastructure, there's an issue like we talked a little bit about, there's a ban on books and using your proper pronouns, so we're gonna need some advocacy from either the students, the teachers, or the parents to be able to push for safe spaces for individuals within their schools. Also, we need to revise our research approaches. As we said, there is a lack of data and research on transgender individuals. We need to push for better funding to support being able to self-identify on any survey. Also, healthcare policies and procedures, we can see that there's an issue in the curriculum. We need to readdress this to ensure that gender-affirming care is not optional and revisited more than once within the curriculum. Lastly, primary care providers. We have a lack of primary care providers. We need to better educate undergrad students and even high school students about the possibilities within medicine and how they can better support themselves and the students and their patients to get into medical school. Now, I had some reflection and insights. Like I said, I do identify as transgender, but I still continuously learn so much about the transgender identity and gender-affirming care. I was able to interview some transgender individuals and healthcare providers about their experience with gender-affirming care, and I learned about some underlying factors even I didn't know about. I learned that the transgender individual is not the only one who experiences this gender-affirming care, who doesn't feel how everyone is impacted. We have our healthcare providers, our friends and family, and you even have the policymakers and insurance companies that are making these decisions. I'm learning about the importance of gender-affirming care on physical, mental health, and even spiritual health. And also, I continue to learn about the resilience and barriers that transgender people must have to be able to access this essential care. I leave you here today with 4 calls to action. I ask you to seek a deeper understanding for transgender individuals and gender-affirming care, to advocate for policies and safe spaces for all individuals, to support educational initiatives for awareness and inclusivity for the public, and also engage in dialogue, share stories, and listen to other individuals as they are all unique and have their own experiences. Thank you so much.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. First and foremost, I want to just commend you for bringing your own insights to your project, and I think on behalf of everyone to thank you for being willing to share your story and your lived experience with us. One of the things that I'm quite struck by is, in particular relation to this issue, the harm that language can most often unintentionally create. Even our cultural lexicon for the way that we talk about these issues pathologizes people as patients when actually this isn't something to be cured or fixed. I wondered, in talking about standardizing education, how we could deal with bringing this into our standard education system, but also in supporting practitioners who are already practicing, and how we can support them to maybe change and shift their lexicon and how they communicate.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Just kind of analyzing. I talked about the curriculum, but then also trying to support the healthcare providers that are already practicing. That's a really good point. So I did focus a lot of my research on the current curriculum, and I've done some personal research on curriculums across Canada about how they go across gender-affirming care. Though when it comes to practitioners who are already practicing, it may unfortunately be up to them to have to do their own work and research in it. But at the same time, being sure to find that balance without relying on your patients, quote unquote, but the people, the transgender people, not relying on them to have to educate you on their life. So you have to be able to listen to their stories, but also do your own research and education on their experience as well. So as a healthcare provider, if you're already practicing, I would recommend probably doing your own research and advocacy on your own, while also keeping that conversation open. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Theodore, for sharing your great work. And for that really engaging presentation. Amazing work. Thank you. I just also want to share appreciation for how you zoomed in on different parts of your math. I really thought that supported the accessibility of your storytelling and sharing some of the stats. That was a part of your work, so thank you for that. My question is around how you've described the gaps in research approaches and research itself. I'm just curious to you, what does data justice and ethics look like in strengthening this work? Like, what does that look like and feel like for you, and how would that support your interventions?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. Making sure that you're not requesting transgender people to reveal their identity when they don't feel comfortable doing that is really important. Just giving them an option to be able to self-identify. A lot of surveys now, you have the option to volunteer information and such like that for research data. So we will have to allow these individuals to do it at their own pace and allow them to identify themselves however they may see fit. I think that's the best way to start doing that, just by giving them options even, and being sure that we're always separating sex and gender, of course, as well, which is a lot of what I found with issues, like especially the census. It was, what is your sex and not what is your gender, or vice versa, and that's difficult as well. So being able to also opt out of questions. So coming to that, I think just being sure to make sure you provide the option without requiring that, requiring an answer for that. But I hope that kind of answers your question for that, with the surrounding the justice of that and making sure that the ethics of that are there, and just making sure they feel comfortable in themselves presenting that information.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
So, fun fact, both UNB, the first two teams this morning, UNB and University of Manitoba, are brand new to Map the System, as is Centennial College, who you'll hear from in a little bit. And then the other three schools that you will hear from are actually have been with Map the System for a while and have done things like develop courses and programs to support Map the System that sort of deepen it in multiple faculties and multiple areas. One of those schools, who will be presenting next. Oops, I'm going in the wrong direction. Perfect. Université de Sherbrooke. So we'll give you a few minutes to come up here and get set up. And again, feel free to go to the washroom or use this break as an opportunity to slip out for a drink.
Hi everyone. We are Mary and Julie from Université de Sherbrooke in Quebec, and we're going to show you how building more could worsen the housing crisis in a city like Sherbrooke. So first, why Sherbrooke, right? Actually, we moved to Sherbrooke 2 years ago for our studies. So Sherbrooke is located in southeastern Quebec and has around 174,000 residents. Recently, Mary and I tried to sublet our lease to become closer to university. This is how we met Ghislain. Ghislain was a foreign student who was very interested in taking over, but totally rejected by our landlord. So at first, we thought it was a clear case of racism here, right? Until we met Charles. Charles was a young worker from New Brunswick, coming to Sherbrooke for a new job. But he didn't get the job he was waiting for and ended up unable to afford housing. Then we thought there was maybe a flaw in the system for those who didn't have enough incomes. Until we met Sylvie. Sylvie was a low-income single mother. She had to wait 2 years to get a place in an HLM, low-income housing. And after that, she had to leave right away due to mold issue in her apartment, leading the Youth Protection Center to threaten custody of her child. This is when we realized there was a real problem generating bumped outs, deep-rooted in the system, and we really wondered, like, how could these people find accommodation then?
So more and more Sherbrooke residents can find a home, and it's not getting better. Rental prices are constantly increasing, and it's even changed the face of homelessness. More and more people with no homeless history are finding themselves on the street. So in Sherbrooke, between 2016 and 2021, the city population grew by 7%, while the vacancy rate dropped out from 6.4% to 1.3% in the last 5 years. At the same time, the rental prices are rising too, of almost 13.2%, and the waiting list for low-income housing has been rising in the last few years. So the only solution that found by all stakeholders is to build more affordable and social housing. In sum, the city of Sherbrooke committed to spending $17 million, but only in February, the city has already reached its budget for the years 2024. So to give you a quick overview, this all has the stakeholders in order of power. They all have many solutions to reduce this crisis, but we saw that there were some problems. And the 13 interviews we did, they highlighted some issues that didn't appear in documentation. So the first one that didn't work out is to building more social and affordable housing by the help of the government, of the provincial government with its new Quebec Affordable Program housing. So there are some problems. The first, the funding deadlines are getting longer. The second is that they require more investment from the local municipality. And the third, it doesn't respond fully to the need of the OMH, because it doesn't allow the construction of large units, which is the most longest waiting list for HLM. What's more, it also supports the construction of co-op housing, which is considered affordable because it's offers a unit at 80% of the median rent. But affordable for who? Because of course it's less expensive than the private market unit, but it's not appropriate for people with low incomes. The second one is to increasing the housing affordability, but on the private market, by allowing people with low incomes to live in the private market and paying a rent corresponding to 25% of their income as an HLM. But we discovered that ultimately this program benefits to landlords.
So everyone agrees on one thing, one solution. The solution is to build more. But what if this proposed solution wasn't really designed to solve the housing crisis, and instead was increasing the number of bumped out? Follow me on this, and let's reverse the perspective now. Imagine if Ghislain, Sylvie, and everyone has a sufficient housing, and that the crisis were solved. What would happen to Quebec's economy? Considering that 6.9% of Quebec's GDP is coming from real estate construction, the government would lose a huge economic sector, right? Banks and developers would face reduced housing projects, leading to substantial financial losses. Even cities would collect fewer taxes, affecting their budgets. This system perpetuates a cycle where those in power benefit from the real estate sector, lack of financial incentives to address the housing issue of the less fortunate, with little power. But now, what really happens when many people are looking for a place to live? This contributes to justify the need to build more. But building more and affordable housing stock won't help many people find a place to live, right? Building more is not a solution designed for those who really need it. And these mechanisms keep the bumped out of the system.
In fact, at the root of this structure lies a profound paradigm, the financialization of housing, which has transformed the perception of housing. So the perception of housing have changed, and it transformed it from a fundamental need into a profit-making tool. So under the growing influence of the financial player in the real estate sector. So the capital allocated by investors continue to increase, while the affordability continue to decrease. So by affordability, we mean that people should not spend more than 30% of their income into housing. But in Sherbrooke, more than 26% of the tenants exceed this limit. So the evolution of this paradigm led the society to normalize the current system and making access to housing as a basic need impossible.
Financialization accelerates poverty. Imagine you're looking for a place to live. Initially, you can afford the private rent, right? But quickly, rising prices are going to make it unaffordable. Then, you'll have to climb down the poverty ladder and to turn to social housing. But the fragmented system and the multiple criteria make it very hard to get a place here. So eventually, you, Rislan, and many others will fall through the cracks and become bumped out. And this group is growing every year, including people who have never faced homelessness before. Speaking of fragmentation, I like to illustrate this problem with the boxes analogy. Because in the end, that's exactly what the system does. Put people in boxes. Take the example of Sylvie, the low-income single mother. Her first option, the cheapest one, HLM. But it requires to meet multiple criteria and a 2-year wait. And we remember after getting housed, she had to leave because of mold issues. So her second option, co-ops or NPOs. But here, she didn't have enough incomes, so she became a bumped out. But what if we thought outside the box now and changed the rules of the game, right? Let's start by changing behaviors, and with that, the provincial legislation. Inspired by the Finnish model, a new law could create an agency to unify key stakeholders. This agency would implement a plan, like the Finnish Housing First program, to provide free accommodation for homeless as a first step toward reintegration into society. Now, let's address the private sector. Inspired by the Vienna model, Quebec could socialize its private housing stock in order to accommodate 60% of its population. In fact, Vienna caps rents to prevent real estate overbidding, and Berlin has even attempted to freeze rents for 5 years, and also bought back 6,000 units from the private sector. So let's not wait for the future to resolve the housing crisis. Let's do it now, maybe with bold moves, but inspired by the best global models.
So finally, the Sherbrooke housing crisis goes far deeper than simply building more and new home. This crisis seems to touch the entire society, but it's revealed a profound issue, the dehumanization of housing, which excludes more and more people from the social fabric. So we consider that this crisis is a demonstration of the need to move away from the capitalist logic of growth and to reestablish more human and social justice to make sure that everyone is in the same situation as Ghislain, Charles, and Sylvie to have a home. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to both of you for your presentation. I would like to congratulate you for doing it in your second language. I know how stressful that can be, and you did very well. So I wanted to mention that. Also, thank you for letting us, seeing the forest behind the trees. Your presentation has been very enlightening to discover all the web we needed to see. I like how you frame things and how you present new solution. And I'd be curious to know, knowing, being a Quebecer, how important real estate economy is. How would they be part of that new system? Real estate developers, how would they fit in the new system? How would you convince them to, act differently in the new system?
It's a very good question. So, as I was saying, the idea here, if we want to be inspired by the Finnish model, for example, is to create a structure where we could unify key stakeholders. So developers are parts of the key stakeholders, of course. And so with them, association, government, provincial government, cities, it would be the idea would be for them to work together to create a plan for everyone to be agree to this plan. So everyone would have the same power here, right? And then we'll have social acceptability, and it would be easier for them to be integrated in this plan and to, it would be okay for everyone.
Yeah, but I think we have to change the perception of housing. So the real estate sector, we don't be able to do a lot of profit with housing. So it means that the housing goes more in the socialized sector and not in the monetary value.
Yeah, and I can add to that, for example, in Vienna, what they did is that they financed developers, and for that, to build houses, but on one condition is they caps rents, so that they put like a ceiling, you know, so developers would not allow the prices to go up, and so it was like just securing the market also. So there are little solution, and we can while we work together, we can find solution to this crisis.
Thank you. Awesome, yeah, thanks. I just want to echo Luke's gratitude for presenting in your second language. I know that must have been challenging, but you did a really good job.
Thank you.
My question is focused maybe on another barrier to the system. And from what I understand and from my own lived experience, discrimination plays a big part in equitable access to housing in general. Did you have an opportunity to engage with people with lived experience, or people who, you know, might have experienced some of that other side of this mental model? And what are your thoughts on that? Is there an opportunity, or maybe you can expand on the equitable access to affordable housing or housing in general?
Yeah, actually we had 14 interviews, I think. And so what was amazing, it was that all these experts, we met experts, we were talking about cases they encountered, and people bumped out actually. And some of them would face racism. And so, like as we said, when we were talking about Ghislain also, this guy wanted to take our lease, but he couldn't because of our landlord who really wouldn't want him to take the lease back when he saw his origin. So yeah, of course, this is a big issue part of the housing crisis. And also, you have to know that Sherbrooke has the highest rate of immigration in the province of Quebec. It's 8.2% of the population of Sherbrooke were immigrants, and so we also faced a lot of this. And the thing is that now immigrants, they don't have enough income to go to the private sector, and so they have to turn to the social housing. But maybe sometimes you have like big families, and there are not apartments who fit them, and so they are in the waiting list. But as Mary was saying earlier, they are not the future construction that are being planned are not being planned with the waiting list number of people. Like it's not related. So that's also a huge problem. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, amazing, and not in your first language. Yeah, wonderful. Université de Sherbrooke. Okay, next up is Centennial College.
Good morning, everyone. I am Ayeshwini, and I'm here with my teammates Misael and Nivethitha. Today, we'll be presenting about the education employment discontinuities among international community college students in Ontario. In recent years, there has been a significant rise in the number of international students across Canada. In 2023, over 1 million international students held a valid study permit in the country, 52% of whom were enrolled in a post-secondary institute in the province of Ontario. Ontario, as you can see, has the highest percentage of international students, followed by British Columbia, Quebec, and Alberta. However, due to the varying policies across these provinces in the country, we have chosen to focus our study on the province of Ontario. The reason for the surge in the number of international students is partly due to the changing immigration policies in Canada over the years, and also due to Canada's international education strategy, which facilitates the increase of enrollment of international students, as well as the integration of these students into the Canadian society.
International students have a variety of contribution to the Canadian context, and I would like to share a little about the revenue contribution that we have. In 2018, international students contributed a total of 21.6 billion Canadian dollars to the Canadian economy, 228 million of which was directly through tuition revenue. However, despite our significant contribution, the utilization of our skills in the Canadian labor market has been a challenge across the country and in Ontario. And international students like us are seen to face a disconnect between the education and employment from our previous education and the employment that we may find here in Canada. All three of us are international students from various countries in Asia who have recently graduated from a postgraduate program from a community college in Toronto, Ontario. We came here with a dream of progressive and meaningful employment, excellent education, stable finances, and a solid societal support, which is how Canada advertises itself as a destination for international education. However, we face the reality that there is an existing paradox of international students being seen as a solution to Canada's skill deficit, but our skills and experiences being foreign and inapplicable to the Canadian context. Therefore, we are given more short-term, low-paying jobs that fill more short-term labor needs. And we find ourselves asking where do we fit in and how we can move on from this deficit-based perspective of international students to a more strength-based perspective. It is also important to learn about the stakeholder system and how it functions. Therefore, I'd like to highlight a connection between the governments, post-secondary institutions, employers, and international students by taking an example of the recent and sudden policy change on the temporary cap that was placed on incoming international students. A policy change such as this is announced by the federal government, implemented by the provincial government, and there are responses from various stakeholders. Post-secondary educational institutes may narrow down the courses that they offer, and they may face panic induced by reduced incoming revenue from international students. The sudden changes can also leave employers confused about the status of international students, thereby making them less likely to employ us. International students, therefore, may not find the kind of program that they're looking for or the kind of professional employment that they seek, leading to discontinuities in education and employment. Changes at the policy level always have a ripple effect, and being at the center of the stakeholder system, it is the international students who often seem to face the brunt of it.
We will not be able to understand the systemic challenges without understanding the policies, the barriers that limit us to transition from education to meaningful employment, and the root causes that we face to help us utilize our skills and capabilities. Since 1947, Canadian immigration policy has evolved from perceiving international students as temporary guests to recognizing them as potential source of skilled labor. Today, Canada acknowledges international education as a strategy for economic growth, highlighting the important role of international students as ideal immigrants, crucial to addressing labor shortages. While this federal policy context shapes the immense potential that we bring into the Canadian economy, we at the same time bear the brunt of the uncertainties of these policy changes. Interestingly, the province of Ontario's education policy only focuses on primary and secondary education. We are confronted with several barriers. With the differential fees and the current cap on international enrollment, work restrictions leading to unemployment and underemployment contribute to a fundamental disconnect between policy and the actual labor market opportunities, rendering us unable to find jobs at the same level of our capabilities. We have also noted gaps between community colleges and the labor market. Yes, schools provide us with a Canadian study experience, but it doesn't lead to actual opportunities that will give us a Canadian work experience. Not having clear strategies for international student employability, the lack of long-term vision, limited stakeholder collaboration, and commitment to bridging education and employment make it difficult for us to navigate the job market effectively. Employer bias, which favors Canadian work experience and language skills, often undervalues foreign work credentials, making it challenging for us to qualify for skilled jobs. Measures have been introduced for fairer hiring processes, but there is a need for clarity in the delivery and implementation of the policy, highlighting the urgent need for fairer and inclusive hiring processes. These barriers stem from a deep-rooted issue of contradictory policies, misaligned employment values, and ultimately perceiving international students as deficient. The disconnect in policies and practice on immigration and international education, employment values, economically motivated policies, and the silo mentality of all the stakeholders. All this combined create a thinking model in which international students are perceived deficient in employment capital, and this perception significantly limits our access to meaningful employment.
Now we see what are the solutions available to address this issue. The first one is International Student Connect Program. This is the only Ontario provincial program which give information to international students to mitigate their issues. But the issue with this program is it's only give informations. It won't help with anything in practical. The second solution we are having is policy enhancement. In the year 2000, PGWP, Postgraduate Work Permit System, was introduced, where international students was given work opportunities soon after the graduation. And in 2023, Bill 149 was introduced by the Ontario government. This bill is a policy that mandates employers cannot expect Canadian work experience from foreign students. The main objective of this policy is to value the international experience we have. But there is a flaw in this policy. How a person could monitor the behavioral thinking patterns of the employer. What if the employer still expects Canadian experience? How the policy is going to monitor this? The third solution we are having is career development initiative by the colleges. Now, the interventions and recommendations we suggest. The first one is expand support program. Increase funding for these programs. Settlement programs. Settlement programs are already available in Canada and in Ontario, but only for immigrants and refugees, but not for international students. So we recommend to allocate fundings to international students as well in these settlement programs. Our second intervention is stable and transparent education and immigration system. If you could notice, from 2024 January, apparently every week, the policy about international students are getting changed, amended, interpreted in different ways, which makes everybody confused. International students also don't know what to do, and also employers really confused about the status of the international students. The third intervention we suggest is wage subsidiary program for international students. Create programs similar to Canada's youth employment and skill strategies. For example, summer jobs. Summer jobs is an opportunity given to students, but international students do not get that privilege to work while they are studying in the summer job. This opportunity is provided to domestic students and also to refugees, but not for international students. Why is that? Why Canadian policy is seeing us as outsiders? So this is very easy to accommodate us also in the summer job programs. Our final intervention is we suggest to create strong stakeholder collaboration. So the key learnings here is, now the government tends to associate international students with national crises such as housing and economic hardship. Media may also promote this view recently. Hatred is spreading within the community regarding international students in social media, which are not good signs for the future. What connects all this is the deficit-based perspective on the policy level towards international students. We understand changing the mindset of people is really hard because what we think is very subjective. But at least to try give awareness will help to mitigate these issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Centennial. Amazing work, and really appreciate you diving into an issue connected to your own experiences as a team, so thanks so much. Just want to say I really liked how you delivered your root cause analysis, as well as including that historic timeline and sharing with us the really important mental models behind this issue. I thought you did a really great job in your presentation and in your materials breaking down this complex topic into a digestible, accessible format for readers. So great work on that. My question is around if you, in your research, have come across any trends that you might expect in the future around systemic actions that might impact education or employment, or those two pieces together. Do you, have you come across that in your work, or do you anticipate seeing any opportunities in the future of where, the direction that this topic is headed and how your leverage points might fit into that space?
Through our research on specifically the policy changes over the years, we have seen that there is the trend of policies being unstrategic, unfortunately, and there are very sudden changes, such as, especially this year, since the beginning of 2024, we have been seeing a lot of policy changes every other week, which unfortunately are against international student integration into the Canadian society. We feel that our leverage points and our interventions of being able to build awareness around this in the Canadian society can, be the point of change for us in the future. We thought of a few things that we could do. For example, we could start with awareness within our own college, where we can, talk to the people who are there. We can talk through our point of contacts who are able to, take our voices to maybe upper management or the administration. And we also really want to build this leadership among international students ourselves, and we really want to speak to, other international students, because this deficit-based perspective towards international student we feel is not just an outsider perspective, but sometimes it's also very internalized when we step into a system where it's so common that international students are thought of as deficit or deficient. So we really want to create that leadership within the group itself too.
Thank you so much.
Hi, just want to echo my fellow judge. Thank you so much for a great presentation and really sharing the experiences you have, and also kind of breaking down the mental models that exist not only within employers, but how that can really impact policies moving forward. So just a question, noting that immigration and jobs are really hot topics when it comes to solutions and finding solutions. So I'm kind of curious to know how public opinion can play into any of the solutions that you have recommended, or if there's going to be any other solutions that you might have highlighted but would like to speak more to.
So when it comes to public opinion, public opinion is influenced by, nowadays it's mostly influenced by the social media and the media newses. The media newses is mostly influenced by the intentions of the politicians. That's what we say. Like, for example, every time when a national crisis issue is addressed, the international students will be the hot topic. They say like international students and then housing issue. International students, then economical crisis. This is not going to work. If this continue, then public will, Canadians will think that, okay, international students are the reason. If you stop international students, everything will be sorted out. But that's not the case. So it should be start from the hierarchy of the system. And then changing a person's personal perspective is really hard. To be honest, basically, Canada is an immigrant country. Everybody has a different background from some other countries in the world. But still, we have even some international students who are now PRO citizens, they have the opinions against international students. That has to be changed, but it's not like a day and night change, but it takes time, but by creating awareness from the top level to the bottom.
It's sorry, I would just like to add one thing. It is definitely, as we said, a multi-stakeholder approach that we want to go for, and we really need that to be able to create change. And our group, we truly think that all that starts at the policy level, and we would really like to reinforce the idea that, you know, policymakers need to really take this into consideration and come up with policies that are more strategic and stable and allow international students to be truly integrated into the Canadian society, which is what the Canadian International Education Strategy actually proposes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So just a comment on international students. Map the System has hugely disproportionate, when you compare the population of international students to domestic students just in the general university population or college population, Map the System has a much, much higher proportion of international students. It would be, honestly, it would be a shadow of itself without international students. So viewed as an asset, absolutely. I can't imagine Map the System without international students. So thank you for reminding us. So we have two more teams to present. Just a comment as well. So you'll notice that with Centennial College, we also have Humber College here. Map the System is open not just to universities, but also to polytechnics, to community colleges, any kind of post-secondary, and it's also open to students at any level, whether it's a college diploma or a PhD or anything in between. So it's agnostic. The majority of the students tend to be undergraduates or diploma students, but it's certainly open to everyone. Okay, so the next team, Humber College.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chandra, but my preferred name is Nat. Today, I am here to present to you my presentation titled Breaking the Cycle of Hate, a system analysis of anti-LGBT sentiment in Indonesia. The reason why I chose this topic is because this is a part of my life, and I have always wanted to talk about this issue. So I want to thank Map the System for giving me the platform to do it. I want to preface this presentation with two things. First, I use the term LGBT because this is the most commonly used term in Indonesia. And second, LGBT rights has been on the rise, not only in the West, but also in Southeast Asian countries like Malaysia, Thailand, and Singapore. You can see rainbow flags flying everywhere. Meanwhile, in Indonesia, there is a different type of rainbow. It is a rainbow of pain and suffering. Different type of abuses, ranging from verbal abuse, legal repression, violence, and even brutal murders, like immolation and mutilations, are happening in Indonesia. It has been on the rise in the last 15 years. So that brings us the question, why is this happening now? To answer that, we have to look back in the past. Indonesia has always been a tolerant country with a diverse culture that is accepting of different gender identities. But then comes the Dutch colonialism. Indonesia was united under Islam to rebel and fight for their freedom. But it also pushed forward conservative values in Indonesia. Then, in the authoritarian era, Indonesia becomes a police state with social repression that strengthened those conservative values. And then comes Reformation era, where Indonesia takes a step forward in democracy. But it also creates a power vacuum, a contestation of power. That brings us to today. Different stakeholders are using anti-LGBT sentiment as a currency to advance their agenda. Political leaders and religious leaders are using it to garner popular vote and maintain that position of power. The media using sensationalism to garner profit. Meanwhile, the public sees LGBT people as the disruptor in their society. Each of them have different agenda, but different they may seem, they are actually interconnected. As you can see in my system map, things are very much intertwined. They are creating a ripple effect that push forward anti-LGBT sentiment. In a simple term, it looks like this. The public launch hate crime, the government launch crackdowns, the media spread misinformation about LGBT people. But it also works differently. The public pressurized the government to take action against LGBT people. The government censored and banned LGBT content in the media. And there is also conservative religious group that not only spread teaching of hatred and condemn LGBT people, but they also endorses those anti-LGBT campaign that is done by the government. All of this creates a system, reinforcing system feedback that push forward anti-LGBT sentiment. Things gets more complicated when the Western tries to intervene. We would normally think that the UN or developed country in the West would be able to help mitigate the situation. But instead, it pushed forward anti-Western sentiment, and it is perceived as a threat against Indonesian sovereignty. As we have seen in the past, we would be able to understand why Indonesians sees in LGBT ideology as a part of Western agenda that tries to corrupt the nation. Not only that, the latest criminal code revision in 2022, which criminalized cohabitation, it implicitly criminalized LGBT people, but it also affects women's rights by breaching their privacy and freedom. And by criminalizing LGBT people, they're excluding them from economy, which leads Indonesia into an economic decline. And it doesn't only affect the nation, it creates a socioeconomic disparity within the LGBT community. Additionally, there is also criminalization for peaceful protests that suppress the voice of minority. By doing so, it leads Indonesia into a democratic backsliding. Of course, people are not staying still. There are efforts being made on every level, from local, national, and international. But they are not perfect. They face many challenges, ranging from lacking of manpower, funding, or even just plainly facing resistance from the system itself. These are some of the possible interventions. First, it is crucial for us to revise our legal code, as it is not only being used by political opportunists, but it is used by the public to justify the violence and hate crime against LGBT people. Second, we can see from our neighboring country, namely Malaysia, which is a predominantly Muslim country like Indonesia, which has succeeded in doing so. We can try to understand and learn lessons that can be applied within Indonesian context, how they are able to do that. Next, international support is very much needed, but we need to take a different approach, an approach that is culturally responsive within Indonesian context. That is in order to prevent further and avoid any perception of threat against Indonesian sovereignty and nationalism. It is a difficult task, but it is not impossible. Lastly, Indonesian people think that there is no place for LGBT people in the society, and that is wrong. As we have seen in the past, LGBT community has always been a part of Indonesian culture and society. It is crucial for us to remind Indonesia of our more tolerant roots. To do that, we need to see at the mental models. There are not just one or two mental models here. This is not just about homophobia, not just about shame culture, not just about cultural conservatism. We need to understand the whole mental model at play here to understand Indonesian as Indonesian. And to understand that, I invite you to look at my system map again. Notice those black boxes. Those are prejudice. Looking at me, standing here right now, you might think nothing of me. But if I were to tell you that I am a gay man, you would have your preconceived notion and implicit bias. And for Indonesian people, these are those biases. All in all, it boils down to one thing: prejudice. They see us as the enemy of the nation, as a social disease, as immoral and sinful, and as a foreign ideology that tries to corrupt the nation. Without tackling this, those level of changes and solutions will not work effectively. This is the main fuel of everything I have discussed with you today. To tackle that, we need empathy, because empathy is the antithesis to prejudice. I would like to add this presentation on a more hopeful note. Things might seem really bleak right now, but it is not black and white. Many people in Indonesia are fighting for a change. And personally speaking, I have been through a lot in the past 10 years. I have been rejected by my country. I have been through conversion therapy. I have become a refugee for a while. But now things are getting better. I am here with my partner today, and my family are slowly accepting me. I used to hate my country for what they did to me. But throughout this journey, I feel that the hurting inner child in me are slowly healing. You might think that I am a rich, privileged kid that is running away to Canada. You're right about one thing. I am privileged. It is a privilege to be able to struggle to be here, because so many people in Indonesia are trapped in the system of abuse and they are unable to struggle at all. And I would like to use this privilege to be the voice of change. And even though there's not much I can do right now except for raising for awareness, but I believe this will be a stepping stone to create a ripple effect for bigger changes in the future. And on that note, I hope that with this presentation, we all can learn to be kinder with each other. Thank you.
Thank you for such a powerful presentation that really
Thank
opens
you.
our eyes to how difficult it is to make any change, and for really sharing your stories and really helping us understand how prejudice can really play a big role in making systems the way it is and keeping the status quo. I would just want to see if you can explain a little bit more about how Malaysia, as you mentioned, as a neighboring country, has been able to successfully reduce the anti-LGBT sentiments, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about how prejudice has played a role in the past and how maybe they have kind of moved past it.
Okay, so thank you for the question. It might be a little bit long answer. For the Malaysia part, it is very recent. It is not in my written submission. It just recently happened in February 2024. They were repealing the criminalization of sodomy, which is used similarly like Indonesia. They are criminalizing LGBT people implicitly. I have not looked deeper into that, but I can talk about similar situation that I applied in my written submission, which is Singapore and not North Cyprus. Singapore is another neighboring country in Indonesia, near Indonesia. They repealed the homosexuality law on the base of human rights law. So the human rights law is, they have a stronger standing ground to be able to repeal that. But it is a very grueling process. It takes, I think it's about 8 years since 2013 until 2018 where they are finally able to repeal that. The other one is North Cyprus, which is a Muslim country, but they're in Europe. So they have a standing ground with the European Union. They have a human rights laws there. And I believe with that, they are able to repeal that. As for Indonesia itself, there were actually almost progress in allow to protect against discrimination, which includes LGBT people. But that got rolled back due to the 2016 moral panic in Indonesia. So progress has happened, but it goes down, and it's going up again slowly. People are fighting for that discrimination law again right now. There is no concrete evidence for it yet, but fingers crossed, hopefully it will be working.
Thank you very much. And just to echo what Vanessa said, I just wanted to say thank you so much for bringing your experience and being willing to share that with us. One of the things I really liked about your written presentation, first of all, I want to commend your systems map. They are extremely well done. They're beautiful. And the other thing I wanted to ask about was in your written work, you talked about representation in being able to change laws and being able to change sort of the cultural norms. How might we encourage individuals who are experiencing this to become sort of, you talked about them sort of enrolling in law school so that, for example, in the future, they might be able to support law and legal changes. What steps do you think will be important to take to encourage that?
Okay, so to answer that, I don't really have an answer specifically to encourage people to take a path of law. You cannot really encourage people to be a lawyer or to really work in the courthouse and things like that. The advocacy that I meant in that regard, many activists in Indonesia are slowly taking that way. Some of them are fighting in that regard, but any fight, any advocacy itself is a huge help in this huge mess. Yeah, mostly that I would say. But there is lots of protest as well, pushing for, demanding the government to repeal the laws.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the things you might notice about Map the System is there's these really complex maps that come up on the screen and a lot of detail, and indeed there's layers and layers and layers that you don't see, and students have to be really judicious about like what they're actually showing in a 10-minute block when they've spent many, many weeks or months, and sometimes years, looking at these issues. So I'm sure you can appreciate there's lots of layers beneath it, but also it means that Map the System is, as much as being a systems mapping competition, it's also a storytelling competition. So it's really wonderful to hear stories like this. And it's also a reminder that Map the System is a stepping stone towards becoming a change maker. And so we're seeing really living examples of that here. Just a brief commercial break. If you're out in the lobby, you will notice there's a table just off to your right. The Institute has a number of our publications there. Some of them are just free for the taking, so feel free to take any of those. We do annual environmental scans, for example, sponsored by the Calgary Foundation, looking at emerging trends and issues. So we have a few of those and some other publications as well. Okay, we have one more team to present, and then it'll be lunchtime. And by the way, you're all invited to lunch, and I'll explain the instructions for that in a moment. University of Waterloo, welcome to the stage.
Hello? Okay. Allow me to begin with a story. A 25-year-old woman in Canada was attacked by her ex-boyfriend. To protect herself, she stabbed him and ran away. He later died from the stabbing, and she was charged with murder, which would have given her a life sentence. But she found a lawyer to argue for self-defense, and soon after, her charges were dropped. Now let me tell you another story. Two sisters, 19 and 21 years old, were approached by a man making sexual advances towards them. The man later died, and a cousin who was with the sisters at the time had admitted to the killing. But the two sisters were found more responsible, so they were charged with murder, convicted, and sentenced for life. This year marks the 30th year they're both in the prison. Two very similar stories. One is hailed as a survivor, and the other two have gone down in history as criminals. What made the difference? Well, among many things, the first woman is white, and the two sisters are Indigenous and residential school survivors. This is just one of the many untold stories I came across as I did my research on the overrepresentation of Indigenous women in Canadian prisons. My name is Fiona Lee. As a non-Indigenous and newcomer to Canada, I chose to do my research on this topic because of my legal background and my interest in the ongoing reconciliation work in Canada. I partnered with the Mennonite Central Committee, MCC, in Ontario to look at the issue nationally, but to focus on solutions locally in Kitchener-Waterloo, where the largest female federal prison, the Grand Valley Institution, is based. And I'm also currently working on an internship with them looking at actionable entry points to address this in our community. I'll be happy to talk more about how I grounded my research in MCC's relationships with the local partners and Indigenous voices in the Q&A, but here is what I've learned. Currently, Indigenous women make up 5% of the adult female population in Canada, and yet over 50% of women in the federal prison are Indigenous. Not only that, they've been going to prison younger and for longer. And while this has been happening in the last decade, the overall federal women population and non-Indigenous women in prison have been decreasing. And this issue is not new. Hundreds of reports have been written about this since the 1970s, and yet the trends for Indigenous women are still going up. It really begs the question, why is this still happening? To understand why, we first need to know what led the Indigenous women to crime. Research shows that before they are criminalized, they are first victimized. They are very often victims of colonial policies leading to intergenerational trauma, systemic poverty, displacement, higher exposure to physical, psychological, and sexual violence, and as a result, they find coping strategies to navigate that violence and the harm, and therefore, essentially, they're criminalized for their unmet needs and their trauma. In fact, by being Indigenous and female, they are 7 times more likely to experience violence than non-Indigenous women, most evident in the ongoing missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls problem. In the interviews that I've had, people repeatedly told me that Indigenous women are very often charged for crimes they shouldn't be charged for in the first place, and they are more severely punished for the same crimes than non-Indigenous women. And this has led to their incarceration rate being higher, not only than non-Indigenous women, but also Indigenous men. Putting this into a prison pipeline, then, we can see that the journey for Indigenous women down the prison does not begin when they come into conflict with the law. It actually begins before that, during their childhood, and in fact, at every stage of this pipeline, you can see, especially going through the legal system, they are penalized with systemic racism, and actually something can be done at every stage to stop them from advancing in this pipeline. Also, largely due to the lack of reintegration services, a lot of them would then come back into conflict with the law after they are released, and the loop goes on for them. Looking at stakeholders, then, Indigenous women at the core are very often separated from their communities and their families due to the colonial history. The local police play a role in opening the gateway to the prison pipeline through their over-policing and racial profiling, and the issue is then perpetuated by the systems at the state level, which are influenced by the media and the public at the macro level. As I put this into the system map, I found that there are 4 reinforcing loops that are perpetuating this issue. At the micro level, child welfare takes Indigenous children away when their mothers go to prison. And research shows that the younger the separation from the mother, the more damaging effects it is for the children on their social well-being. And this adds to the intergenerational trauma and the disconnection from their culture and their communities, just as residential schools and the 60 schools did. And organizations have said that these children very often would graduate from child welfare into the prison, forming a pipeline there. At the state level, the criminal justice system also perpetuates this. Correctional services pathologize Indigenous women as unstable and dangerous. And currently in prison, a majority of the women placed in maximum security are Indigenous, meaning that they would be often put under solitary confinement, segregation, denied access to the programmings that would help with the needs and the trauma that they enter into prison with, and therefore exacerbating them as they are released. At the macro level, public perception also plays a role, first of all, in the punishment ethos for crime. You know, you do the crime, you do the time mindset. But research overwhelmingly shows that by having a tough on crime mindset and calling for harsher laws, it only hurts those who are marginalized by the legal system, including Indigenous women. It actually does not deter crime. The other perception is the systemic racism that is rooted in colonialism. This has normalized the criminalization of Indigenous women, especially in the legal bodies. And as the media portray more Indigenous women going to the prison, it reinforces the idea in the public that they are bad and they should be punished. But fundamentally, all of this is rooted in the colonial laws and policies from the government, which has created that intersectional vulnerability of Indigenous women, pushing them to harm and crime in the first place. As long as the policies are not addressing their needs, the cycles will not break. In fact, what the government has been doing actually is delaying effective change. It must be noted that many Indigenous communities never agreed to be under Canadian laws, and yet they continue to be penalized by it. And by subjecting Indigenous women under the penal system, what the government has been doing in the last few decades is to tweak the existing system by treating the indigeneity of the women as a cultural difference to be accommodated rather than addressing the systemic oppressions at the roots. This may help improve the experience of certain women, certain Indigenous women in the prison, but it doesn't bring systemic change. It only normalizes continuing subjecting them under this penal system, and this delays what could be a balancing loop, which involves alternatives to the system that honor Indigenous self-determination so that they can use their restorative practices to challenge the status quo and actually bring true change. So I've just explained currently the solutions that the government bringing are more downstream, making tweaks in their existing legal system. For instance, they've introduced the Gladue process, which mandates judges to look at the cultural backgrounds of Indigenous persons during sentencing, and there are cultural programmings or healing lodges which are designed for Indigenous peoples and proven to be conducive to healing, and yet they cannot access these because they're placed in maximum security, and there are a lot of insufficiencies with the Gladue process as well. Upstream, there are Indigenous organizations doing great work trying to prevent the women from going down this pipeline. For instance, there's a fast-growing Indigenous child welfare agency that is reclaiming control on child welfare in Ontario, and there are different healing centers in Kitchener-Waterloo, including Healing of the Seven Generations and Crochet Lodge that are bringing communities together doing trauma healing work. But these organizations definitely need more resources to expand the capacities to meet the needs. The levers of change then in the immediate terms, in the short term, would be to increase access to custody, such as healing lodges, as well as Indigenous representation across the criminal justice system, especially in the prison. But in the medium term, we need to support the supporters, the Indigenous organizations that are building healthier social support systems for the women so that they can exit this pipeline before they come into conflict with the law or be better reintegrated into society when they leave so that they don't come back into the loop. But long-term advocacy needs to focus on alternative legal systems that honor Indigenous self-governance, which is an inherent right already recognized in the Canadian Constitution. In the interview that I had with Centre for First Nations Governance, there are a lot of conversations already going on with First Nations leaders talking about models of self-governance. So this can be expanded to the legal systems as well. Throughout my research, I learned, first of all, that this is an ongoing colonial problem, and therefore we need to decolonize mindsets and structures for solutions to be meaningful. Secondly, I realized that as a member of the public, I have a role to play in this as well. Indigenous women are criminalized for their unmet needs, and therefore punishment is not the solution. We need to challenge and question the punishment ethos for crime. However, I've also come across a lot of Indigenous women in my interviews and in my research, and actually, although I'm presenting alone here today, I bring with me the stories that I have heard that have shown me the Indigenous women's strength and their resilience, including a circle keeper at the Healing of the Seven Generations in Kitchener. She was formerly incarcerated at the Grand Valley Institution in Kitchener, and yet she found healing at a healing lodge through connecting with her culture, and therefore now she is empowering other women who are struggling. And there are a lot of organizations doing great work as well to support the women, so there is still hope. I hope by now you are as concerned as I am on this issue. Let's get behind Indigenous organizations and leaders who are restoring their communities upstream and pursuing self-governance downstream to change the criminal legal system. Thank you.
Fiona, I just wanted to sort of reiterate what I had expressed yesterday, and just a lot of gratitude for you in using your privilege to shine a light on something that's very dark as a collective history, as a shared history. I also shared with you yesterday that in the space of reconciliation, there's this desire to move this work forward, and people struggle, and organizations struggle in how to do that, where to start, where to begin. But I think you have demonstrated a lot of leadership in someone who's not Indigenous, not motivated by the desire to be an ally, but you're motivated by the realization that severe genocide and assimilation efforts have occurred, and you're inspired to right the wrongs of that past. So thank you very much for that. From the Blackfoot perspective, we are a matriarchal society, similar to a patriarchal society, except with a lot less control, a lot more holistic approaches to healing and all that kind of stuff. And so this issue is incredibly important for the community that I come from. My question to you is, recognizing a few years ago there was a national inquiry into the findings of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. How did you consider those recommendations, or how do you plan to continue to incorporate those recommendations into your work moving forward?
Yes, so in my research, I found that the missing and murdered Indigenous women issue is very connected to the overrepresentation of Indigenous women in the prison. And there are a lot of recommendations that target different sectors of society. And I think, first of all, we first need to, like you said, challenge our assumptions and also educate ourselves as non-Indigenous persons on this land. Especially for me as a newcomer, how is it that I have the privilege to enjoy education here, and yet the original peoples of the land do not even have access to clean water? And therefore, I think starting with education would be a way. And also, at first, when I did my research, I focused a lot on the legal system, because I first thought there are flaws in the legal system. So I explored the legal system first. And through that, I also saw there are parallels to the flaws that contribute to the issue of the missing and murdered Indigenous women, especially among law enforcement and the legal bodies, and the biases in that. So I think we need to raise awareness. I think people like non-Indigenous persons like myself and perhaps many in the room, we are not affected by the legal system. We don't think about these things. We don't worry about being attacked on the street at night. We don't worry about going to the police and the police won't believe us. And so I think some of the work could be also then challenging our assumptions and then joining hands on the advocacy with such as starting with the legal system, and how can we have a better system that actually creates healthier communities and safer communities for all. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. And one thing that I appreciated in your analysis is how you were able to go upstream to different historical factors. You were able to look at sort of, things like victimization or other forms of discrimination, trauma as the upstream causes of what causes, a lot of Indigenous women to be overrepresented in our prison populations. I'm going to speculate a little bit, and this is based on just some early trends that I'm seeing across the country. I think Canada is going in a way that has a lot of language that is tougher on crime. You're seeing some cities sort of opting to remove themselves from having RCMP presence or provincial police presence and going with a lot more local, I'll call them like local law enforcement, regional law enforcement. You also see First Nations often have their own police services. And so I'm curious whether you see that as something that is going to help this issue, if you see that as something that is not going to help this issue, maybe it makes no difference at all and there's just other more upstream things that we need to be doing as a country. But just, yeah, any of your comments as to how you think that trend might impact sort of the overrepresentation of Indigenous women in our prison system.
Sure. Yes, so in my research, I also came across policing as one of the gateways, for change that can help. And I think there are two sides to it. So my understanding is that actually there are, or the police force, the federal police, is actually increasing the budget every year, or at least maintaining their very large budget by justifying that because of the crime rates that are going up, they need larger bodies to protect communities. And the sort of the counter argument to that would be to have actually not centralized police forces and having local police forces, like you mentioned, that understand the communities better so they can better serve their communities. But the downside in my research that I found is that, say for First Nations policing, there are different First Nations having different arrangements with the police. There are some that have self-administered police forces. And then there are some with the federal police allocating forces for them. And yet the federal police would always have more budget than the self-administered police. And so the local police actually, even if they're able to form one, they don't have enough resources, especially among reserves, that areas that are very large, they often don't have enough resources to actually do the work that they can to serve their communities. And so I think local policing would be a better way, but then they definitely need to be supplemented with resources which can actually be allocated from the federal police to the local police forces, so that there will be more local protections and local solutions then.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're actually a few minutes ahead of schedule. All right, so we invite you all to join us for lunch. The way you get there is you go out the doors, you turn left, go through a double set of doors, and it'll be in the Ross Glen Hall. So it's attached to this building, but you just have to go through a corridor and a couple sets of doors. It's room EC 1075. So that's EC 1075. Lunch will be served starting at 12:15. So please be back here at 1:45 for performance by Shumaila Hamani, followed by the announcement of the winning team. So 1:45 back here. Thank you all. Enjoy lunch. Welcome back. Shumaila Hamani is an artist, scholar, and a social entrepreneur. With a PhD in ethnomusicology for the University of Alberta, Shumaila studies, writes, and performs Islamic Sufi music. Hamani's music includes chants, drones, harmonium, santur, poetry, field recordings, and more. She's the founder of the Deep Listening Path, a unique approach to helping changemakers address burnout that blends artistic modalities, mindfulness meditations, positive neuroplasticity, and insights for legendary changemakers. And there's a table outside in the lobby, if you get a chance, with some more information. Shumaila is a recipient of the Cultural Diversity Award from Edmonton Arts Council and the State of Kuwait Award in Islamic Studies, and has presented her research on the music of Pakistan at many international conferences in North America and abroad. She won the Women in Music Honors in Emerging Voices 2023, is part of the Artist as Changemaker program at MRU's Trico Changemaker Studio, and is an artist in residence at Global Music Match and Arts Commons in Calgary. And somehow, in her spare time, she also manages to study the resourcing of community campus engagement across Canada, UK, and Australia, something many of us in this room are keenly focused on. So, join me in giving a warm welcome to Shamila Hamani.
Thank you, James, for such a generous introduction. Hello, everyone. It's incredible to be here at Map the System Canada Finals. I have been listening to your presentations since morning, and wow, I've been so impressed and inspired by the breadth and depth of the projects advocating for systems change. And I'm so excited to share my music with you this afternoon. It's an honor to be part of this event that brings together passionate change makers, especially at this significant moment in history where marches are happening across the world calling for ceasefire, decolonization, and freedom of Indigenous lands. So I begin by recognizing that we are presently in Treaty 7 territory, Mokinstasis, known by its colonial name as Calgary, and these are the ancestral lands of the Nivethitha Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley nations. In the South Asian traditions from where I come, we start our performances with asking for permission or ijazat from the elders, and I would like to seek ijazat from the Indigenous elders, from the honorable guests who presented this morning, as well as my mentors who are part of the lineage of the Gwalior Gharana in the Sindh region of Pakistan. A mentor of mine once advised to us that creative change makers must ask themselves a fundamental question. What is the nature of time that you're living in, and what are these times calling upon you to do? And we must ask ourselves, what is the moment asking from us? At this very, very particular moment, I want to sing a song that celebrates all your hard work, and I will present to you a Sufi poem, which is in Sindhi language, one of the oldest languages rooted in the Indus Valley civilization. This poem is by a Sindhi poet, Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai, and it's about the coming of spring and the prosperity it brings to the land and how it washes away all the difficulties and pain and brings rewards for all the hard work. So the poet takes this moment of spring and rainfall to offer prayers for peace and prosperity for the entire world, particularly his native land, Sindh. And it is composed in a melodic mode, which is called Rag Megh, but in Sindh, it's referred to as Sur Sarang. And this is from the poetry of Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai. So I will sing that to celebrate your hard work and all the work that you have done and will continue to do for systems change. बूंद पिरियां जी बहार लगी बूंद पिरियां जी बहार लगी दर्द बंदियां जो हो देश वसी प्यो बूंद पिरियां जी बहार लगी बूंद पिरियां जी तिखड़ी सीरा समुंदर जी तिखड़ी सीरा समुंदर जी लहरन जी ललकार लगी लहरन जी ललकार लगी दर्द बंदी जो हो देश वसी प्यो बूंद पिरियां जी बहार लगी बूंद पिरियां जी उठड़ा में हाँ भली रते उठड़ा में हाँ भली रते गाहन जी गुलजार लगे गाहन जी गुलजार लगे दर्द बंदी जो हो देश वसी प्यो बूंद पिरियां जी बहार लगी बूंद पिरियां जी अतियों शाह लतीफ चवे लालो लाला लतीफ चवे साजन मुला जी सार लगी मुर्शिद मुला जी सार लगी दर्द बंदियां जो हो देश वसी प्यो बूंद पिरियां जी बहार लगी 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 बूंद पिरियां जी देवा पानी सा बहार लगी बूंद पिरियां जी बहार लगी दर्द बंदी जो हो देश वसी प्यो बूंद पिरियां जी बहार लगी बूंद पिरियां जी बहार लगी Thank you so much. You're an amazing audience of passionate change makers, and now I'm thrilled to share with you a poem that I wrote in Urdu language, and it composed myself. It's called Bedari. I wrote it when I was experiencing deep migraines back in 2012, and I couldn't celebrate my birthday with my friends, but I felt the need to celebrate how far I've come in my journey as an artist and academic. Because, you know, when you're following your heart and dedicating yourself towards social impact, The path presents many barriers and challenges that you have to overcome. And this song is about triumph. And today is a day of triumph for many of you who have been dedicatedly working towards bringing your projects to fruition. So let's celebrate your persistence, perseverance, and all the sacrifices you made when you embraced your calling to make systems change. And I'm sure there were many fears that got in your way. And when you became larger than your fears, you were led to a place of deep insight and knowing. And that place is Bedari. It's a kind of an inner insight and awakening. And I hope that this song, Bedari, inspires you to continue your work.
Oh
Thank you. Wow, the energy here is fantastic. It's hard to believe we are already at the last song, and thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience. So, once again, I would like to share with you how inspired I am to be amongst you change makers. I've been learning so much, and it's really a privilege to be here and witness all these incredible ideas that you have been pursuing. So the final song that I present to you, before I give way for the judges to announce the results for today, I want to share with you a moment in my life when walking on the path of my calling led to roadblocks, and I did not know how to move further. So in that moment, I moved from a place of learned understanding of the world towards faith-based knowing, kind of believing in myself and restoring the faith that there is a higher intelligence in the universe that will support my journey to bring about the change that I aspire to see in the world. So this song is called Primordial Covenant. And it is a bilingual poem in Quranic Arabic and English that I wrote way back in 2020. It was nominated for the Alberta Magazine Awards in Poetry and also published by a feminist magazine called The New Forum. And I wanted to, it has 6 to 7 verses, and I wanted to find a way to compose this long poem in a way that goes beyond the ABA structure of a song. So it has a unique melodic development, and it combines different musical traditions, including South Asian, Hindustani tradition, Middle Eastern, Maqam, Hijaz, and Western chord progressions. So, presenting to you Primordial Covenant. Thank you very much. Free, free Palestine. A contemporary South Asian poet, Arundhati Roy, says, another world is not only possible, she's on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. I wish you a great rest of the afternoon, and thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience. I'll be at the Deep Listening Path booth. You can come say hi to me. Thank you again.
Thank you, Shumaila. I can't think of a more appropriate artist to have joined us today. It was really perfect. And when we first reached out to Shumaila, she didn't hesitate. She was like, yes, before we even asked her, and wildly excited about what we were doing here. So, you know, we could have reached out to any artist who I'm sure would have gladly obliged to do the gig, but Shumaila was more, this was more than a gig for Shumaila. She put a lot of thought and time and effort into that, and it really shows. So what a treat for us. So now comes the moment that we have been waiting for. I'm going to invite my colleague Ashley Dion, program lead for Map the System Canada, as well as George Constantinescu, Executive Vice President and Chief Transformation Officer at ATCO, both to join me on stage. So when the name of your team is announced, I want you to please come up to the stage to receive your award from George and pose for a photo with both George and Ashley, and then exit the stage. And then once everyone has received their award, we're going to ask all the teams to come back up on the stage for a photo. Is that more or less correct? Okay. And what we'll do is we're going to announce a series of excellence awards to start, and then we're going to do the top 4 overall awards. So, is this where you want everyone to be for now?
Yeah, I think.
And then which way is good to come up?
Probably if they enter on this side and exit.
All right.
There, we'll just wait for to finish getting cleared though.
Okay, perfect. So, again, when your name is announced, just come up here on the stage, get your photo taken, and then exit for the next team. Okay. It's funny, the first award actually goes to Ashley Dion because we wanted to conceal the other certificate. So she's on top. Yeah, and justly deserves that award. Okay, the very first award, the Excellence Awards first. This is for Excellence in Visual Mapping. So this award will go to the team who has excellent systems maps that are showing the complexity of the problem, but are also easy to read, easy to understand, and very engaging. So the winner of the Excellence in Systems Mapping Award is University of Calgary. A little fun fact about University of Calgary team, they are all first-year students. They're also architecture students, and their topic had nothing to do with architecture, which is really impressive. Congratulations. Next up, this is going to be another Excellence Award, and this one is for collaboration. So this award is awarded to those who model excellent systems collaboration by involving non-student team members from outside their immediate network or collaborating with an external partner relating to their challenge. So for example, did they bring in researchers, policymakers, industry experts, specialist NGOs, local charities, people with lived experience, and so on and so forth. So the winner of the Systems Collaboration Award is Memorial University of Newfoundland. I should add that each of these excellence awards, there's also a $500 cash prize that accompanies this. And of course, if there was an award for coming the furthest, you'd win that too. So the next award, we actually have two winners. This is Excellence in Systems Research. So this is for the team whose project showed outstanding performance across the research assessment criteria and greatly impressed the judging panel on those scores. So should we do one at a time or? Okay, the first winner of the Systems Research Award is University of British Columbia. By the way, UBC also focused on the issue of overrepresentation of Indigenous people in the justice system. An amazing presentation. I watched it yesterday. The next recipient of the Systems Research Award is University of New Brunswick. So the next award is given to a team that is not actually a team. It's made up of one person. It's to recognize the huge amount of work that goes into a project when working as an individual. So this is called the Individual Entry Award, Excellence in Individual Entry. This goes to University of Manitoba. So our last Excellence Award is the Undergraduate Project Award. This recognizes the tremendous efforts of undergraduate or diploma level Map the System participants, keeping in mind there are also master's students, PhD students, even postdocs sometimes. And the project is especially challenging for those who really have not yet experienced master's level studies and research. So it's particularly impressive that people at a diploma level get this award, and that is the case this time. It's Centennial College. Centennial, by the way, is in Toronto. Some of the places, like it's obvious where University of Manitoba is. It may not be so obvious where Centennial is. All right. So we are now down to the top 4 teams. This is the top 4 overall prizes. Each of these 4 teams will receive up to $10,000 in funding by virtue of ATCO's support to what we call Apprentice with the Problem. So this is to deepen their learning over the next year, and they work quite closely with Ashley to design a plan for doing that and develop a project, and we provide coaching and mentoring along that journey. So the 4th place team, which receives the Apprenticing with the Problem grant, 4th place overall, University of Manitoba. So in 3rd place, in addition to the $10,000 Apprenticing with the Problem, there's also a $2,000 straight-up cash prize. So in 3rd place, Université de Sherbrooke. So in 2nd place, and again, also winning the Apprenticing with the Problem grant, but also a $3,000 cash prize. So 2nd place overall, University of Waterloo. So to announce the 2024 winner of Map the System Canada, also winning a cash prize of $4,000 and Apprenticing with the Problem, I'm going to hand the mic over to George Constantinescu.
Thank you very much, James. I'm truly inspired to be amongst you all. It really is a privilege for ATCO to be able to support this incredible event, this competition, and to give a voice to all this energy and all this passion that we've witnessed over the last couple of days. It gives me great optimism for the future to see that there are people like you in the new generation that are willing to take on these difficult challenges that we all know require difficult decisions to be made, a lot of trade-offs. And none of that can happen in any kind of an intelligent way without the kind of work that you're putting into understanding the systems that are at play in all of these areas. So it's incredibly gratifying for me to know that the future is in good hands. I'm a naturally optimistic person, and it's nice to have my optimism confirmed by witnessing what we've witnessed over the last couple of days. It's I'd also like to extend my gratitude, and I know that this suspense is killing everybody, so it is a little bit intentional. I'd like to express my gratitude to everybody that's worked so hard to organize this event, certainly all our friends from MRU, and all the contributing institutions, and certainly our esteemed judges who've done an incredible, difficult job, because everybody that presented was excellent. And so to be able to choose one amongst so many excellent presentations must have been a daunting task, but certainly one that there are they're more than well equipped to undertake. So without further ado, the first prize in the 2024 Map the System Canada goes to Humber College.
Very well done. You called it on Friday. No, I didn't. Thank you, George. Thank you, Ashley. Congratulations to all of you for having the courage, the tenacity, the interest, the passion to take part in this challenge. It's experiences like this that will make a difference, not only in your resume, it'll help there, but to the community and to your lives well beyond university. So you should all be proud of the phenomenal work undertaken to get this far and to come be with us this past weekend. But remember, it is merely the start of a journey. So whether it is this issue or others that will become of interest to you as you continue your journey through post-secondary and beyond, you now have another set of tools to deploy to transform your journey from student to change maker. So thank you again to ATCO for making this all possible, to the many student volunteers and team members that made this event run like a well-oiled machine. For those of you who are not coming to Banff and had signed up to be on the buses are parked just outside here to the left, right? Just outside the Continuing Education Center here. Please make sure you are on the bus by 3:30. Try and be there by 3, but 3:30 at the latest. And for those not joining us in Banff, you must be feeling a bit of FOMO right now. So if you are not going to Banff, but you do have luggage stored here, please let those who are getting on the buses grab their bags first, as we have a fairly tight timeline. Thank you for being part of this wonderful day. Please tell your friends, your colleagues, how awesome this program is. Have a safe journey to your next destination. If we could get, if the teams, all 20 teams could come back up on the stage for photos, that'd be great.